It was January 26, 1974, when a person named Gudmundar Einarsson decided to go to a club with a couple of friends in the nearby city of Hafnarfjörður, which is located south of Reykjavik. So they were drinking, dancing, having a good time essentially, and then Gudmundar decided it is time to call it a night. Since he was highly intoxicated, he wasn't in a condition to drive home. So he went out with another guy and they were looking for somebody to, drive them home safely. In that moment, by some accounts, a group of his friends with a car drove past him and saw him with another guy who was even more intoxicated, standing there in the snow and looking for somebody to take them home. So I'm not clear why they didn't just ditch the other guy and take him with them, but they just decided, okay, let's leave him there in the snow, stopping, and we'll just move forward. So basically that was the last time he was ever seen. Now, worth mentioning is the fact that Iceland as a country has really low percentage of crimes. Actually, the crime rate was so low that they didn't have any type of systems in place, for the missing people, some task forces or something. So when somebody goes missing, they form a team of bunch of volunteers and they search. So that happened here, and after a few weeks of unsuccessful searching, they decided, we're good, we're not gonna find him, let's call it off. And that was it. 10 months later, on November 19th, a person named Geirfinnur Einarsson, no relation to Gudmundar, was in his flat with a friend in a city of Keflavik, and they were watching TV. All of a sudden, he gets a really strange phone call by accounts of his wife. So he picks up the phone and he only says something like, "I'll come," and he hangs up. Then he gets into the car, drives in the city, parks the car in front of nearby cafe in the city, leaves the keys into the ignition, and disappears. So now they had 2 disappearances in 10 months, and they were like, boy, this is too much for us. I mean, what's going on here? And outcry of the public was very, very high, and they were putting tremendous amount of pressure on the police to actually start doing their jobs. What are we paying you for? And the police naturally yo, we gotta sit down, we gotta cool off, there is something going on here. And this is where the things are getting started. Since they didn't have any bodies and any piece of evidence whatsoever, logically the investigation was really, really slow. And only a couple of things they had were a bunch of rumors. So they were we better examine these rumors because basically it's all we got. And that leads us to the suspect number 1. The guy named Sævar Kieselski was a local petty criminal, some kind of a thief/illegal substance dealer. Let's give him that kind of title. So he was already known in the police, and naturally he was the first guy they were going to check out because it's a small place, it's not like a big kind of city, and local criminal guys are the first one to go on the list. So Sævar had a girlfriend named Erla Botladettir, and she worked in some kind of telecommunications post office, and they had a sort of Bonnie and Clyde relationship because they were scammers, they scammed people, and they used to forge checks. So naturally when the police picked up Sævar, they were well, we're gonna pick up his girlfriend as well. But before they picked them up, she got pregnant with his child, and he decided he's gonna provide for his family by importing cannabis from Denmark to Iceland. So that's like a father of the year kind of thing there. That's it, they're done. Police immediately decides to trash them into the solitary confinement. Now remember these words well, because solitary confinement, those words are extremely important for this whole case, so keep them here. Now after 7 days of solitary, Ertla decided she has enough and she confessed to the fraud with checks. Now logically police wanted Savar to confess as well, and they went to him and interrogated him for like 16 hours, and they presented him, yo man, this is a piece of paper and you have like a signed confession of your girlfriend. And he was like, yeah, I don't really have a choice, we did it. So now the police was wondering, that was like pretty much easy stuff. Let's see if we can like take this whole thing to a different level. And this is when the whole thing started like really crumbling down for these 6 people we are going to mention. Ertla was getting ready to, go out of the solitary because she was cooperative and she gave them Savar. But police went to her and showed her the picture of the missing Gudmundar. And they were like, hey, you know something about this guy? And she was like, I don't know him personally, but we were in a club once. And then they were like, tell us what you know about the night he disappeared. And she said that she was in a club alone, so Savar wasn't there. She thought that he was in Denmark or something. And she was in a club. She decided to, crash early. And when she got home, she basically said that she hit the bed immediately. But she was having some kind of a nightmare and heard Savar outside of her window whispering and rumbling some stuff, I don't know. And the police were like, are you sure you were dreaming? Are you sure that wasn't real? And then she was like, I don't know, maybe it was, maybe it was real. And from that moment, they just grabbed her like this, and the nightmare literally started there. So back to the solitary. When you remember something, you can come out. And while she was there, she obviously started to question her whole existence. So what's real, what's not? And she was like, is it possible that Savar and somebody else killed somebody in my apartment and I saw the whole thing, but I can't remember? And then she mentions one information, that when she got home that night, the bed sheets were like missing. And listen to this now. According to this information, the police comes up with a theory that she went home and saw Savar and some other guy carrying the body wrapped in sheets. I mean, they just figured that in their heads, according to the information that she had like a nightmare and the bed sheets were missing. So they made her write that on a piece of paper and sign it. And she goes to they go to the Savar and said, yo man, this is getting serious, because we now have a statement that you actually killed somebody with somebody. And the guy was, what? I mean, what's going on? I didn't kill anybody. And they were like, that's not what your girlfriend says. Now Savar starts to question his reality. He starts to question, was I maybe too drunk or too high? And she did really saw me with somebody, and I did it eventually. And the person that Ertla named was Christian Vidar Vidarsson. So now the poor guy was like a third person who was involved in all this mess. And we need to remember one important thing here. Ertla was 20 at a time and she had a baby at home. So she was like questioning her reality, and on the other side, officers, they were trying to, they were putting so much pressure on her, and she was just like, let's get this over with. Then they draw a full confession from Saivar, but it's not the end because he's got some names as well. So he basically said, yeah, I did it, but I had help from a couple of guys. And those guys were Trugvirunar Leifson and Albert Klan Skaftason. So now we have 5 people in total that are involved in this whole mess. Now, as soon as they heard the names, the police didn't bother to ask any questions whatsoever, to investigate anything. They just went on and picked up those guys. And you have one time to guess what happened with those guys. Yeah, they put them into solitary confinement. And a few weeks forward, voila, they all confessed to a murder of Geifinnur Einarsson. So the police were like, yeah, this technique actually works pretty well. So, good job. So their main technique, police work, was consisting of, if they don't want to confess, let's just throw them into the solitary a longer, and they were sure confess then. So the famous saying, if something is not broken, why should we change it? And they were having their little room where they would put them in, and after a few weeks, months even, they were broken down and they had their confession. So excellent police work there, buddy. The main problem was that their stories were totally off. In one version, the murder took place on a boat, and in the other, the murder actually took place on a land. And then Christian Widerson actually said there was another guy who is involved in this whole thing. And there was some kind of foreign looking guy. That's what the description was. And it turns out it was actually Saivar's teacher. I don't know, it was high school teacher or something, by the name Gudjon Skardiadinsson. I really hope I didn't butcher this one as bad as the others. So another Breaking Bad reference here, because I cannot stop thinking about Walter White and Jesse Pinkman. So they now had 6 people, and of course they go and pick up the teacher, and of course what's the next step. After 17 days in a solitary confinement, the teacher was like, yeah, I was involved as well. So now they have 6 people in total that confessed to murder. Alright, so 6 confessions, still no bodies, still not a single piece of evidence. But we did our job, right? They're confessed. Now, it's obviously worth mentioning what the conditions in a solitary confinement were. So they were interrogated hundreds and hundreds of times. They were deprived of, I hope that is the word, deprived of sleep. So they were not allowed to sleep regularly, and they were sleeping maybe 1 hour, 2 hours a night. So with constant banging and torturing, basically. And there is even one report that by the police officer, by the guard who worked there, that actually many times they took Saivar's head. They took Saivar's head and they put him in a bucket of water, and they threatened him, if you don't confess, we're going to do you, we're going to drown you. So yeah, by this point we can pretty much conclude that this is actually really forced confession they like managed to collect. And these people were like, I don't care, man, I don't care anymore, I'm gonna say whatever you want to hear, just leave me alone, just let me live. So things were naturally so bad in there, and they were playing with their brains and their minds the whole time that the situation got like really bad. And on May 3rd, 1976, Erla actually comes and says, yeah, I shot Geirfinnur. So back to the solitary a few more months. And that was going on and on and on. And actually a new detective, who was now ex-detective, named Gisti Gudjonsson, actually took a teacher and says, yo man, let's go to the polygraph testing. And while on the polygraph testing, the teacher started to, exhibit some really chaotic and psychotic behavior. And he was like starting to put all the pieces together, and he was like, wait just a second, what am I doing here? I don't remember anything, so I actually don't know if I was there. I actually don't know if I done anything. And here I am like rotting in this solitary confinement after I confessed to killing some guy. And then the detective started to look a little bit closer to all of this, and he took his journal, started reading, and he concluded with basically 100% of certainty that whole of this scenario is classic case of false confessions. So I will read now what he said about this whole mess. These individuals had absolutely no knowledge of what happened. They were just trying to appease the police and to be cooperative, because they knew if they were not, they would be given more solitary confinement. I worked on miscarriages of justice in many different countries, and I never came across any case with such intense interrogation and with such lengthy solitary confinement. So basically, in essence, this statement should sum up this case completely. But despite all this, they were found guilty in 1977, and they were all charged in accordance to, the roles they played in this whole case. And yeah, everybody went to jail. Fast forward 2018, everybody was acquitted of the murders, except Erla, who was acquitted of the murder but was still held responsible for that perjury, fraud, or something. So one of the scariest things about this whole case are total days spent by individual in that lonely room. And now you will find out how many days actually everybody spent there. So Albert Klan, 88 days in a solitary. Erla, 242 days. Gudjon, 412 days. Trugvi, 655 days. Christian, 682 days. And Saivar, 741 days in a solitary confinement. Imagine that you spent only 7 days in a room with no sound, with no light, with just a pure darkness, and you were regularly deprived of sleep, basically little food and water. You were questioned hundreds of times. Your head was in a bucket of water constantly. Would you just, your only wish would be, let me just say anything, and they will maybe, cut some slack on me. Because that's like the only conclusion I can draw here in all of this case. And for me personally, it's not a mystery if they did it, because in my opinion, they didn't do it. The guy simply vanished. So we can talk about the mystery of disappearance of those guys, what happened to them. And as I said in the beginning, there are a lot of disappearances in Iceland. And I'm not completely sure why the police wanted to put this case so bad on these individuals. Because if there is some kind of regular thing there, why desperate need to solve this so bad? I mean, it could be just a huge pressure from the public because 2 persons went missing in 1 year, in 10 months, but this still doesn't justify what they, did to these people. So some final conclusion would be like, this was one of those cases that justice was simply not served. And it just proves what a badge and uniform can do. When you don't have all the answers, you can basically force the answers if you want. So I'm sure in the heads of investigators, they were like, yeah, we cracked this case, we solved it. But in reality, they didn't have anything really, and all they had was just throwing people in the solitary confinements and forcibly extracting false confessions, basically, in my opinion. So I would like to think your point of view on this whole case. So let me know. This was the case of Reykjavik Confessions. As always, thanks for watching and see you in the new one.